Okay, good morning. So we're up to Shin Nun Ches Seif Tes. Says the Machaba, Karpaf Yese Misosayim. You've got an enclosure which is bigger than 2 sosayim, Shehukuf Ladira, and it was built for residential purposes, and therefore you should be able to carry the whole thing. V'notzo rubai ilonos. But then you plant trees in this enclosure. That is not going to be a problem. Even if they're not planted nicely in sort of rows, it's still considered residential, and it's not mevatel hadira. Says the Mishnah Berurah, even if you plant trees in the whole thing, rather, even if they're all mixed up, people plant trees in their garden, it's still considered residential, and therefore it's not mevatel the shein dira of this place. However, carries on the Machaba, Avalim Nizra Rubai, but if it's not planted, you haven't planted trees, Im Nizra Rubai, instead you sow it. So for example, you've got wheat and barley growing there, so then you've got a problem, because that's Mevatel the Shem Dira. It's now a field, it's not considered a residential garden. Hazra Mevatel Nadira, Filu Ein Boim Ela Sosayim, even if it's less than Sosayim, still the planting Zroim there is going to take it away from the Shem Dira. Says the Mishnah Berurah, Sifkat and Samach Vav, Hazra Mevatlin Hadira, Uvezeroinim Lo Dairi Inshi, Vavele Gina. People are, it's a field. There's people where sowing seeds. It's not residential. It's different to trees. For also the Taltel Af B'Shein and Isra, and therefore you can't even carry in the non-sown part. The bottle lay legabe rubai uchazer kulodam. It's as if the whole thing is planted. Okay, afilu ein bohem. When you've got the area which is sown, or base and the base of is not around the residential area, even still, in that situation, it will still be also to carry in the non-sown part, to give the miut bottle because this miut is bottled to the rove. It's as if the whole chotzer or karpaf is sown, and totally you've got more than base of sign. Elasosayim, v'huadin pachas, and even if it's less than that, given sheim roiv, since it's the majority of a yachad im hamiut, yesh yosim beis osayim. Good. So what have we said? You've got a karpaf, an enclosure, which is, it's a hukuf ladira, and therefore you should be able to carry the whole thing. If you plant trees in it, that does not take away the sheim dira, and you can continue using it and carrying in the dira, in the karpaf. If, however, it's sown, you've got wheat and barley and whatever else you grow there, then that's not a mokum dira anymore, that's a field. And therefore, that is going to be mevatel the shem dira. Okay, finishing off the machaba, nizra miut. If, however, only a minority is planted, then im ein ba'el sosayim mutter. If it's smaller than beis sosayim, it's okay. Yosem is sosayim, it's osa. Says the Mishnah Berurah, nizra miut, nira, to adin mechze, also to 50-50. In ein by rotzolem of makam hazarua in the planted area. If it's got less than beis sosayim, then it's okay. As mutter says Mishnah Berurah in Aleph, the ein koach b'miut levatel haroiv shehukuf ladira. The majority was hukuf ladira. So if you've got a small area which was planted, you have a little vegetable patch or something, that's not going to change the status of the majority. Not only that, even in the miut itself you can carry. Because it's not enough to mevatel the mechitzas which were set up l'dira, and therefore it's nothing. Because if it's less than beis osayim, you don't need a hek of dira. However, if the planted area is more than beis osayim, then osa, says Mishnah Berurah, l'taltel b'kulei, then you can't carry in the entire area. Da miut osa, because the miut is also osa now. And because with that, if you've got more than beis osayim, you need it to be mukaf l'dira. But once you've planted that big amount of area, then you've been mevatel the shem mechitza for roiv hakarpaf gamkein nes and mepneishu posuach uparis the drum shemakom. Also, you've sort of taken away the fencing, and therefore it's paros, and therefore you cannot carry in it. Okay, good. That is siftes. Now let's do sifyut. Mishi yesh legina b'chatzerei. So someone has got a garden in his chotzer. Im hu roiv hachotzer. If this garden is the majority of the chotzer, Afilu ein bo ele beis osayim. Even if it's only beis osayim or less, lo yetaltel mimenu min hachotz lebayis. Then you cannot carry from it into the house. Vimu yoisim misosayim. But if it's more than beis osayim, then it's even more strict. Lo yetaltel bo ubechotze ele ba'arbamas. Then you can only carry daladamas in the area. So again, you've got a gina in your chotzer, a garden in the chotzer, and it's very large. Imu roiv chotzer. If it's the majority of the chotzer, then afilu ein bo ele beis osayim. Even if it's less than beis osayim, lo yutalta, you cannot carry from the place into the house. But if it's more than beis osayim, you can't even carry daladamas in the chotzer. Let's do Mishnah Berurah till there. Mishi yesh legina af shekvan isbai kol ze b'sif hakodim in Karpaf. Even though really we spoke about this in reference to the Karpaf in the previous one, nevertheless, we repeat it to apply it as to a chotzer. Lashmina to kshem shezroim mevatli mechitza shel Karpaf shofu l'dira. Just like we said previously in the previous sif, that if you sow seeds, it's mevatel the mechitzas which were of the Karpaf, which were set up l'dira. Well, the same effect will be with the mechitzas of the chotzer. We don't say the chotzer is more chashuv. That's number one. Another aspect that we're introducing over here is the question of whether you can carry from the chotzer into the house of commotion of oil, like we're going to explain in a minute. Even if you haven't got beis osayim in the whole chotzer, and the beis osayim v'adin pachas or less, lo yetaltel to b'chotzer atzma b'vadei mutar letaltel kulei. In the chotzer itself, you can carry afilu b'mokem azroim. Ta'af she'azroim b'vatel mechitzas shel dira, b'zeh she'ein bo eles osayim hari lo boin in hekav l'dira. At the end of the day, because it's less than beis osayim, and you don't need it to be mukaf l'dira, so therefore there's no problem. And the only problem is carrying not in the chotzer, but going from the chotzer into the house. Says the Mishnah Berurah, Ein Zayin, the kivenden is battle hekav shel dira, since you've mevatel the surrounding dira, hari kol hachotzer kakarpaf alma. Now the chotzer's got a status of a karpaf. She also letaltel memenu lebayis, v'chein min abayis lesoicha, and vice versa. V'afilu bekarpaf pochus beis osayim, even if the karpaf is less than beis osayim, v'afilu hein shel odom echod, you cannot carry from the karpaf into the house. So the trees we said in the previous thing will just be considered like a gina. The trees doesn't change the status. It's got the din of a gina.
The thing is the difference between the trees and the zroy.
So now is so the trees will be like a gina, will still be mokum dira. Yeah. In other words, if there was if it was just trees and not zroy, then it'll be fine. Vimhu yoiser rotzolema kol echotzer. But if it's bigger than beis osayim, then you cannot carry more than daladamas. Kadin karmelis, given to bein kula yesh yesh beis osayim, because totally you've got more than beis osayim. V'roiv hazroim bottle shem dir mechotze v'chanal b'siftes, and now you've bottled the shem chotze, and you've got just an area bigger than beis osayim, which is not mukaf l'dira. So then normal rules apply, and you can't carry more than daladamas. Good. That's the first half. Now back to the mechaber. The penultimate line. If, however, this sowing is in the minority of the chotzer, then the following: anything which is more than beis osayim will asa the chotzer. Explains the Mishnah Berurah. If it's got more than beis osayim, that asas the whole chotzer. Says the Mishnah Berurah Pei Aleph. After chotzer roiv legabe gina, even though the chotzer could be the majority compared to the gina, and it doesn't, the gina is smaller, and therefore the zroim is not going to change things. But the actual fact that it's mukaf dira in respect of the zroim has changed. And the trouble is they're more than beis osayim. That's why you can't carry the rest of the chotzer. Also because it's all parrots. We take away the mechitzas. Continues the mechaber. I'm finishing off. If, however, the area is less than beis osayim, then the only problem is you can't carry from there into the house. Says the Mishnah Berurah Pei Beis, also lahitzi to b'mokum hazroim gufa mutar letaltel. Because in this situation, because it's less than beis osayim, in the place of the zroim themselves, it's mutar letaltel or kamosh kosev v'siftes. Eledal kol ponim also lahitzi min lebayis. But okay, you can carry where the zroim are, but you can't go from there into the house. Kadin Karpaf she'ein mukav l'dira. Like any other Karpaf which is not mukav l'dira, she'ein metatli mimeno l'bayis. Mimeno, u'mash mized al kol ponim, mechelek hachotze shor l'talti l'bayis, af k'shiyeh shir beis osayim. From the chelik of the chotze, not the gina, then there you'll be able to carry from that into the house. Kadin kol chotze shematzim mimeno l'bayis, like any other chotze you can carry in and out from there to the house. V'yesh oisrim bezeh, l'haitzi af mechotze l'bayis. Some say no, that from the chotze part you cannot carry into the house. Even though you, like we just explained, you're allowed to carry in the chotze and the gina, at the end of the day, relative to the house, the gina is a mokum also, but you can't go out from there into the house. And since the chotz and the gina sort of open to each other, that extends, the prohibition extends not only from the gina but even to the chotz to the house. But when the zroim is pachas mibeis osayim, shel paras u'pasuach l'gina, which is open to the gina, then don't have to worry at all about that. And there are those who are makel in this situation. The taltal af min chelek hagina gufa lebayis v'adin min habayis legina v'yesh lismech hazev makom atchag. Okay, now let's just finish off Mishnah Berurah. V'chol hamuska bekan, and everything that's mentioned here, hu b'she'ein mechitza ben hachotz lemokom hazroim. That's when there is no mechitza between the chotze and the zroim. V'im yesh mechitza, but if there is a mechitza, then ein chelek echod shaykh lechaver klal. Then they're distinct elements. V'im kein chelek echod zedina kachotze u'mutar l'talta b'kula memena l'bayis. No problem. You can go from the chotze in the chotze and into the house. U'mokam ha-nizra who nidan atzmai, and the place of the nizra is nidan la'atzmai. V'im chelek ha-nizra hu yosim beis osayim. And if the place where you're sown is more than beis osayim, dina kakarmelis. And certainly to go from there to the chotz the other way around, to chotz dinner kush sayachid gomer, because the chotz has got a dinner v'rish sayachid. V'emu rak beis osayim apachas, but if it's less than beis osayim, mutar l'taltal b'kula, then you can carry in all of it. V'chein min l'chotz and l'chotz alone, and then from the chotz to it and to the house and vice versa. Chutz kalim sheshovsu b'bayis. Apart from kalim which were in the house at Erev Shabbos, also lahitzi min hachotz l'gina, that you cannot take from the chotz to the gina. Al kein roish lelechol elishlis begina b'Shabbos. In that situation, you should avoid eating in the gina on Shabbos to efshel lizohe bezeh, because it's impossible to be careful about that. The kolshkein be'imhu yosim beis osayim, also betzilto yosim be'arba amas, then you would not be able to carry more than arba amas. Okay, beseda. All right, beseda. So we'll leave it there. Let's continue the next week tomorrow.